What is going on, everyone? Tim from TFU1 Orbital. I need to work on my intros. I feel like they're just very dry and boring. Maybe I need to do some sort of fanfare or maybe open it up with some sort of joke. I feel like this is getting a little repetitive. So anyway, if anyone has any ideas, let me know, right? So today I would like to go over in detail an install commission that I completed earlier in the week. This particular install has been in the works for a little while, okay? This is for a Solos Hold SK or Solos Hold Starkiller Hilt, right? The client for this particular install did want to go with a hybrid metal chassis. I'm hesitant to call these chassis like Metal Master chassis, maybe Heirloom. It's an Heirloom chassis. It's just not your run-of-the-mill resin or FDM chassis. I have integrated some metal parts into this hilt, much like the folks like Goth 3D have done and Carlos from the taco shop. I've done a chassis like this before on a Vaults of Valhalla Valkyrie, so I wanted to continue that vein, and I think that I will offer this as an option to clients who want it in their personal hilt. Like if you want a chassis that's got metal components, I'd like to start offering that as an option, right? So the client for this particular install did want that. So I took that and ran with it, okay? So we've got a brass battery cover in this particular build. I've also integrated like a kill switch cover, and there are also square red LEDs in like baked into the chassis as well, and I've got a grill that goes over those, right? So the Solos Hold SK, right? We've heard about it. I've seen pictures of it. It's a little bit out of my price range personally. I think they did lower the price on it recently, but wow, is this hilt a lot. This hilt it was a little bit of a challenge. It was a challenge to assemble this hilt. I mean, designing the chassis for it was not hard at all. But the hilt, it comes, obviously it's not assembled when you get it, but there are I think there's like 50 parts to this hilt, right, that you have to assemble. There were a few confusing things about wire management for this particular hilt as well. But I was able to figure out a solution for that. And I'm going to talk about that when we do an up close. But yeah, it was not my run-of-the-mill SK install. Beautiful hilt. It is an absolutely beautiful hilt. The full body is titanium and steel. There are brass parts and brass components in the crystal chamber. I mean, it is a solid hilt. And this is definitely like a showpiece SK in my opinion. But it was definitely a little bit of a pain to install and assemble, really, right? So let's come into Fusion. Before I complain anymore, let's come into Fusion and talk about the chassis, and then we'll come up top, right? Here is the chassis. So I've highlighted the brass components in yellow, but it's just essentially, it's one of my regular chassis with greeblies all over it, right? That I've added some brass parts to, okay? So we've got a battery cover around back here. I have put 4 3mm neodymium magnets along each side of the chassis, and I've also put them into this brass part, right, to help that brass cover stay in place. 4 magnets is a little bit of overkill. However, this particular battery cover is a little bit thinner than the last ones that I have done. So I wanted to make sure that that was nice and secure inside of the grip. So we've got 4 magnets along each side. I've designed some greeblies in this battery cover. Here is the kill switch cover, right? Let me move this out of the way. This is just another grill that is hiding the kill switch that is also held in place with 2 neodymium magnets. Along the back here is a cover for some red rectangular LEDs, right? So I've got 2 different sizes here, 2 large and 1 small, and they just sit underneath that grill as well, okay? before I make you all dizzy with my Fusion navigation. Obviously, battery tray is here. Around the back is our Profi board. The Profi does slide up underneath this lip and secures in place. Kill switch is around back, obviously, where we hit it underneath that grill. More Graveleys, unnecessarily all over the place. And that's it, right? This is the, we do marry up into the upper part of the hilt through this, with this nipple. There is also 2 set screws that are in the hilt. I do appreciate that Solos Hold pre-drilled those. Working with titanium, like if I had to drill a hole for a set screw, I probably would have had a hard time doing that. Titanium is just notoriously hard to work with, so I'm glad that they put those there. They are also in the threads, so anytime I have to drill through threads, I get a little scared because I don't want to cross thread anything, right? So that's held in place with 2 set screws along the bottom. Apologies. This is a 28mm bass speaker from Smuggler's Outpost, fully enclosed. And that's it. I'm really enjoying doing chassis like this so far, right? So let's come up top. The SK from Solos Hold, or the Starkiller. I think a Starkiller V4 is what they call it. But yeah, I mean, this thing is beautiful. It is a beautiful hilt, okay? It's very heavy, right? Very hefty. But it is a very, very beautiful hilt. So at the request of the client, I did heat stain this a little bit. Okay, so we've got some heat staining in the crystal chamber. The cool thing about titanium is you can only get these deep purples and blues with titanium, right? So the client did request that I heat stain in this particular fashion with some of the stain going into the grip, just to simulate that there's heat coming off of that crystal chamber. I did heat stain along the upper edge of this as well. And of course, the top of the Graflex blade holder and bunny ears were heat stained. After I heat stained this hilt, I did seal it or treat it with Renaissance wax. The client requested some sort of coating or sealing. I didn't want to spray this like with a matte clear or even a glossy clear. I did not want to paint this hilt, right? Renaissance wax is a good sealant or protectant to use. I mean, you're really supposed to use it to protect steel from rusting. You protect your guns and weapons with it. So Renaissance wax will help protect this from rust and corrosion. It will also seal the heat staining in the titanium and will protect it that way, right? I have a little bit of it here. I will be sending that along with this hilt as well. So you, the client, can take care of your hilt. That's it, right? So let's talk a little bit about the install process on this hilt. The assembly video for this hilt is over 45 minutes long. So, I mean, listen, if I got a SK from Corbanth, I would assemble that hilt maybe in 30 minutes. But there are so many parts in this hilt. As a matter of fact, there are so many parts to this hilt. I mean, even these small diodes and probes that are up in this upper crystal chamber, these are all in like separate parts. Everything has to be glued together. Everything has to be placed, correctly. There are a plethora of set screws and fasteners in this hilt as well. And just to give you an example, right? So Solos Hold does send Allen keys with the kit, right? So, I mean, here is a perfect example. I mean, some of these set screws, like specifically the set screws for the focusing ring or the focusing crystal, are almost microscopic. I've never seen an Allen key that small. So it was a little bit of, it was maddening to do this install. If I were to have lost any of those very small screws, I would have been screwed, right? So it was a little bit of a challenge to get the whole thing installed. Another thing that confounded me a little bit was wire management here. So they do mention in their video that they've integrated wire channels for wire management, and they have somewhat for the switches. The switches were another interesting thing, but yeah, they did integrate channels for the switch legs, right? But they didn't integrate anything for the leads going up to the PCB emitter. Now, with this particular version of the SK, there are usually, we see red wires wrapping up these bars. So I guess it's Solos Hold's intention to use those wires as your wires for the PCB. I felt a little wary about having hot leads this close to the external part of the hilt. I mean, maybe if you knock it on something, I didn't feel comfortable doing that, right? So the red wires that you see in the crystal chamber inside here, there's one wrapping around the crystal and there's one in the back. Those are both your hot leads. So it's positive and your negative going up to that PCB emitter. So I was more comfortable doing it that way rather than wrapping it around the external bar like that. So yeah, that was a little bit of a challenge, right? Other than that, really, really beautiful hilt. So these switches in the back here, this is another thing. So these aluminum buttons, these are just plungers, right? So there are two very, very low profile brass tactile switches behind this crystal chamber. I had a little bit of an issue because these holes did not line up correctly. They were like, I don't know, like 1/4 millimeter off, and these buttons wouldn't depress. So I did have to open up some of the holes back here for those plungers just to give them a little more play. That way, once everything is screwed together, you're not getting anything pinching or, you know, these plungers can free float and move. Okay, that's it. So let's talk about the chassis. So here is the chassis. So I'm really, really happy with how this chassis came out. I mean, let's talk about it, right? Let's be real. All these are just panels, right? I mean, that's really all they are. There's not a lot of intricate detail in this stuff, not to the level of like Martin Beyer or some of Rick from Goth 3D stuff. But I am excited that we can, you know, we're finally getting to the point with metal, precious metal and metal printing where we can offer stuff like this at a reasonable price, right? So I essentially, you know, you can send this off to Craft Cloud for far cheaper than you would with Shapeways. And I've had a really, really good experience so far sending my stuff to Craft Cloud and having it printed. So, you know, everything's tolerance-wise, everything comes back to me in the exact way that I designed it. So really, really happy with the way this stuff comes out, right? So all of these panels come off. Obviously, they're held in place with magnets. Here are those red rectangular LEDs. So once you get your battery cover off, spring side is your negative. Put your battery in the battery tray. So there are those red rectangular LEDs. Around front, here's your kill switch. Cover that up. Put your battery cover on. And then screw your grip on. You're ready to go. So there is a cover in the pommel. I feel as though it sounds a lot better without this on. So for the demo, I'm going to leave this off. When I did this install, I wanted to make sure I got the PCB emitter below this glass eye so we get some shine through. So I'm really happy with how that came out. I also created a Neopixel holder for a single Neopixel that points up into the crystal chamber. So that is in this thin neck section. It's just like a resin piece that I mount the Neopixel in. I've got notches along the side of it so I can get my leads past it as well. Right. That's another thing I noticed about this particular hilt. There was no place to mount Neopixels, so I had to create one for the crystal chamber. That's it, right? Let's come down to the bottom. This crystal chamber, I mean, even though it was very, very intricate, it's beautiful. It is a beautiful crystal chamber. I mean, with the focusing rings, it's like, so this upper clear crystal, you can unscrew the very, very small set screws and move that up and down if you want to. You can move the lower crystal up and down if you want to. I don't recommend moving it down too far because there are leads coming up through that hole, right? So keep in mind, these are all hot leads that are in the crystal chamber. Top button is your main, bottom button is your auxiliary.
Father's lightsaber. This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight.
I try to put different animations in the crystal chamber for each font. However, because this is a red static crystal, you really want that color to be white or even red. Otherwise, it's going to be weird. It's going to like discolor. Like if you shine a blue Neopixel up through there, it's going to make it purple. So keep that in mind to the client. All right, let's put a blade in it. So this is a 7/8 inch blade holder for this particular, and I love that. I prefer 7/8 inch blades, right? Another thing that I have heard and experienced about Solo's Hold Hilts is their blade holders. Their blade holders can be very tight. In fact, my Blind Knight that I had to sand one of my blades to get it to fit in the blade holder. With this particular one, I did not have to change anything. It's like a perfect snug fit, right? So 7/8 inch blade, slide your blade in, make sure it's resting on those PCB pins. Inside of the bunny ears, there are 2 set screws. The bottom one holds the bunny ear in place. The top one conveniently serves as your blade retention, right? So once you get that top set screw screwed in place, you're ready to go. I'm afraid to hit this thing too hard because there's just like so much, there are so many intricate parts in this crystal chamber. I'm just like, I'm being delicate with it. Let's see what else we got. So this has also been set up with color wheel, right? To access color wheel, you want to hold down aux and tap main. When you find a color you like, tap main again. It'll lock that color in place. See what else is putting in. Great sounding hilt. It's hefty. This is a heavy hilt. Actually, I'd be interested in doing a weight comparison between this and my Corcris, but it's a very, very hefty feeling hilt, right? Beautiful hilt. So that's it. That is the Starkiller from Solo's Hold. Beautiful hilt, beautiful Starkiller. It was, as I said, it was a little bit of a challenge just to get this thing assembled. But as far as the chassis design is concerned, I was really, really happy. Excuse me. I was really, really happy with how this chassis came out. As I've said before, I'm excited for people that they have this option now through CraftCloud. Before, a year ago, 2 years ago, Shapeways was really the only place you could get metal chassis prints from, or metal chassis parts. And in my opinion, Shapeways does run a little high price-wise. So it's cool that we've got another option through CraftCloud, right? So to the client, thank you very much for trusting me with your install. Thank you very much for being patient and understanding. To the viewers, if anyone has any questions about this particular hilt or anything really, please do not be a stranger. And with that being said, may the force be with you always. Have a good one, everybody.